All right. So welcome everybody. We're super excited that we have our first guest speaker of the year for here in physics class. Okay. His name is Shelbert Smith. And like I've been telling you guys, he works for Luscious Garage. He is an auto technician and he's going to tell us a lot about the job, how he got the job, how he trained for it, and also some of what cars have to do with physics. Okay.
My name is Shelbert. Like I said, I've been working at a shop called Luscious Garage now for a couple of years, but this was not my first career. My first career was actually doing something else, and I changed jobs. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about what I did before, how I became a mechanic, what I love about this job, and also a little bit about cars, about the work that I do, and so that you, as you're getting cars, can actually know something about how they work, how physics and chemistry are important to cars, and maybe how to take care of your car a little bit. So over here on the left is a picture of me, little kid, building a snowman with a toy chainsaw with my dad. Originally, I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota, so snowy Northland. And after high school, I went to a 4-year college. I studied Russian. I actually went to Moscow for a while, and then I worked in an office job for about 10 years. And so those office jobs that I learned a lot. I had a relatively good time, but I realized after a while, I wasn't actually what I wanted to be doing. I wanted to have a job that was a more physical job, doing something with my hands. And so I decided to think about what might I want to do. And I knew that I had done some work on my own cars. A friend had taught me how to change my oil. I really enjoyed that. And so after I thought about it a while, I decided I might explore becoming an auto mechanic. And that's a picture of me on the right in the shop that I work in now. So going back to school, I wasn't sure that I wanted to do this. So the first thing I did was that I took some evening classes at CCSF, Community College of San Francisco. And that was a really great option because I was able to keep working my job during the day and go to school at night. And I was able to save up some money. And then also CCSF colleges are actually free if you live in San Francisco. So that's an awesome option. And they do have an automotive program. So I did that for a little while. I did a semester. And I realized that even when I had a really hard day, I enjoyed going and working on cars. And that was a really good sign for me that this was a good choice. So after that, I left my job and I became a full-time student. And what that meant was going to Skyline College, which is also a community college. They have a big automotive program where every semester you're studying a different part of the car. So one semester you're doing all brakes and suspension. One semester you're dealing with engines, and they go really in depth. And that was a really great thing for me because not only do I know how to work on a car now, but I also know what's going on inside. And that's really a great option. There are also a lot of people in this field who don't go to school for it. They just get on-the-job training. So it's all about sort of how do you learn. But for me, starting at Skyline was a really great way of making sure I understand what was going on with the car. And then through Skyline, I was actually able to get jobs in the field. So they partner with businesses and you get an internship. It's a paid internship. They're not sending you out there to work for no money. And that was really great because I was able to work, get experience, pay my rent. And there actually is a big shortage of technicians in the field right now. So it's a great job that will give you a lot of opportunities. So my first job, and this is a path that people take in the industry, first job, I was working at an oil change shop. So you drive in, the customer drives in, we change their oil right there. It takes 30 minutes, maybe an hour, lots of cars all day long. It was pretty exhausting, and I got to see a whole bunch of different cars, though. I learned a lot really fast. I made some mistakes, but I did that first as a summer job. And then once I'd done that for a little while, and I had learned how to do that pretty well, I got my next job, which was at a shop that did tires as well. So it was doing oil changes and also doing tires. And again, lots of different cars coming in all day long. That was actually an internship that I got through Skyline. So they knew that I was a student and that I didn't quite know what I was doing. And I also started doing inspections, and I also started doing minor repairs. So I did that for a while. And then I got the job that I have now, and that is working at Luscious Garage. And we're a specialty shop, and we do all kinds of repair. So I do those things that I learned in the first two jobs, the oil changes and the tire installation, but I also do things like brakes. I also inspect cars. I diagnose problems with cars, and I do all kinds of repairs. So that's sort of a path that you can take to go from not knowing very much and starting in the industry to a good solid job. See, so here's a picture of the shop. As you can see, it's got a lot of plants. It's a shop that's really focused on both being a really great place to work, being very environmentally focused. So along with just looking nice, we also are really focused on things like doing environmentally friendly practices, making sure that we're disposing of everything in the most environmentally friendly way possible. And it also is really focused on it being honest. One of the questions that one of you turned in was about, are you honest with customers? And that is a question that some people do not trust mechanics because they've had bad experiences. And this is a shop that's really, really focused on honesty. We lay everything out, exactly what's going on. We'll even say if we start to fix something and we realize like it's not going to work out, we'll stop. We'll be like, we know you want to pay us to do this, but this is not a good idea. and we'll like stop the job because we want to make sure that everyone has a good experience and that we are as honest as possible with their car. It's also really focused on being an inclusive workplace. Over on the left, you see my boss, Carolyn. She founded this shop about 13 years ago. And one of the things when she was starting it 13 years ago, she wanted to have a really good place for women to work in the industry, which I really appreciate. It's a great place to be for everyone, no matter what your gender or your background or anything like that. It's a really inclusive place. And I like that. There are not as many women working in the industry right now as men, but it is growing. And if you're a woman who is thinking about getting in this industry, there are really good shops to work for. And so I would recommend just whoever you are, if you decide to work in any industry, find people who treat you well. And I feel really lucky that at Luscious Garage I get treated well. So what's it like day to day working at the shop? We specialize in hybrid cars. So sometimes they can be a little repetitive. You have a picture I took one day over on the right when it was just 4 of the exact same car. But also because you're seeing the same car over and over again, you also get to specialize. So I know, especially with a hybrid, with a Prius, which is one of the most common hybrids we see, I know a lot about this car. And that's really, really great because someone can come in and you can help them take care of this car and know these are some problems you might have. Here's how you can stop that from happening. In terms of every day, we're scheduled. So I know at the beginning of the day, these are the cars I'm going to work on. And I might have a bunch of small jobs, maybe like 10 really small jobs, or I might have one big job that will take me 2 days. And I really like that variety. And then the way the shop works is that we have some junior technicians like me who have not worked as long. And then you have some senior technicians who've been here for more than 30 years, and they are a huge resource to us. If you're trying to solve a problem, you can go to them and they can help you. Or if you mess something up, they can help you. There's something that one of our master technicians has told me, which is nothing is a mistake until it goes out the door. And I really appreciate that because it's about if you get stuck, being honest, you don't cover anything up, but it's also okay to need help. And I really, really appreciate that. So science, scientific processes are happening in your car. And one of the first ones I'm going to talk about is automotive fluid. Some of you mentioned engine oil. Engine oil, I've got a picture right there of some new engine oil on the left and some engine oil that's been in a car for a while on the right. So you can see it looks pretty different. What's happened is that over time, it's undergoing chemical processes. You know, it's getting heated up. It's getting into a mixture with contaminants that are in the engine. And so preventative maintenance prevents damage to the car, among other things, by switching out fluids after they become contaminated or get broken down, and then put new one in and keep things running smoothly. Another thing that somebody mentioned is rust. Rust, especially where I come from in Minnesota, is a huge problem. You have all that salt on the roads. Here in California, if you're far enough from the ocean, you don't have as many problems, but rust will wear things out. The metal of the car is reacting with the air, and it's actually changing and breaking down. And so if that happens to a part, you want to go and replace that with a good new part. There's a before and after for the oil. And then the other thing is physics. Physics, as you're driving the car, parts of the car are getting worn down due to things like friction or due to stress. Also, if you get in an accident, that's a huge amount of force on the car. Maybe something will bend or break. And then we're actually going to talk some more about friction next and about how that affects the car, because that's one of the biggest things that leads you to need to do maintenance on the car. So I'm going to have everybody, we're going to talk about friction. And then I'm going to show you a picture of an engine, and we're going to, I'm going to ask with people to type in some ideas about oil and how it works in the car. So if you, right now, sitting where you are, if you drag your foot on the floor or take your hands and you rub them together like that, you're going to feel heat, and you're also going to feel drag, because friction is a force that opposes motion. So let's say that you were just walking along and you never lifted your foot up. You just dragged it along the floor. It would get hot, and you'd wear out your shoe over time if you did it for long enough. And now let's imagine that you're walking along, and let's say you walk through some spilled oil or something really slippery. And then there would be a lot less friction. You would just slide right along, and you wouldn't have that much heat, and you wouldn't wear out your shoe anymore. You'd just be, you might fall over, but you'd just be sliding. So here on the left, this is actually an engine and a transmission, both. It's a huge piece of metal. On the left, you have the engine. That's the taller part. On the right, you have the transmission. And one of my coworkers, Elias, dropped this out of a car. And on the right, you see some of the pieces. And that's just a small number of the pieces from the very top on the left. You can see there's hundreds of pieces in an engine. So what the engine is doing, like in the illustration from before, it is converting the energy and fuel into motion, and it's using combustion to do that. It is burning that fuel up. But obviously, if you're burning something, you're making heat, you're releasing heat, and also all of those bits of the engine moving in relation to each other super fast is making friction. So engine oil is one of the ways that you manage that heat. One of the questions that someone asked that they submitted, and thank you, was about why does an engine overheat? And an engine overheats either because there's too much friction, maybe you don't have any oil in it, and it's just building up heat and building up heat and building up heat, and it doesn't have anywhere to go, and it'll melt things. Or if the engine isn't being cooled properly. And there's a fluid called coolant that you might see. And what the coolant does is it goes through the engine, it soaks up heat, and then it goes through these hoses that you see in the front out to something called a radiator. Because as we know, you cannot create energy and you cannot destroy energy. So all of that heat from the engine, you have to get it out and you have to send it somewhere else in order to prevent the engine from melting down. So that coolant is picking up heat, it travels out of the engine, it goes to a radiator, it dumps heat into the atmosphere, and then it comes back around and it picks up more heat, and it's just going around and around and around, protecting your engine. So I think this is super cool. I'm really into how this really complex piece of machinery works and moves so fast and just keeps going for thousands and thousands of miles. The next thing I'm going to talk a little bit about, in my career path, after I worked on just doing oil changes, I started doing tires. And tires are definitely affected by physics and friction. But a car tire right here, you see, it's this metal rim, and then it's a big rubber tire. It's two pieces, and between them, they hold air. So it's a container for air, like a balloon, and your car is being supported by that tire. And then you see in the center of that tire, there's some holes that you would actually bolt the tire to the axle. So the axle is rotating, the rim is rotating, and the tire is rotating, and you're all going down the road. But without the air in there, Some of you might have gotten a flat tire before. It won't support the car, and if you keep trying to drive, it will destroy the tire. So as you're rolling down the road, there's friction between the road surface and the rubber of the tire that will slowly wear it away. If you were to spin your tires like you're doing a burnout, that makes a lot more friction, and I have a picture of what a burnout will do to a tire on the next slide. And then something to let you know in terms of keeping track of how fast a car is going. There's something called a wheel speed sensor. So behind the tire, you have a sensor that counts how many times does the wheel go around. And that's one of the ways your car knows how fast is it going down the road. So that wheel speed sensor, you have one rotation, and let's say your tire is 2 meters around, your car knows you've gone 2 meters down the road. So then sensor goes around twice, you've gone 4 meters down the road. And that is a really important input for the car to know how fast it's going. And it's also a way that, as a technician, I'm able to graph distance and how fast something is going. Distance times speed. So here's some pictures of some tires that have some problems. Some of the things that can go wrong with tires, I took all these when I worked at the tire shop. First one on the left, obviously it's a balloon. If you poke a hole in it, it's not gonna hold air anymore. So this person ran over a piece of, I think it might have been like a Allen key, but that put a big old hole in the tire. Sometimes you can patch it, sometimes you can't, depends. The next one is a tire that failed internally. So there's actually, the construction of the tire will come apart if it's driven without enough air in it for a long period of time. So that tire is gone, it has failed. And then this next one, I mentioned burnouts. This is somebody who is doing burnouts with their tires, and so much friction, it just wore all of the rubber away, and you can actually see the metal underneath that's a part of that tire construction. And then finally, catastrophic failure. This was someone who had to drive their car with no air in the tire. They were on the road. They just decided to drive their car off of the road, even though there was no air in that tire. And as you can see, it's completely come apart. So that is a complete failure of a tire. So the next thing I'm going to talk a little bit about is brakes. So after I did oil work, after I did tires, then I started doing brakes. And brakes are a wear item because of friction. So when your car is driving down the road, you had that energy that was in the fuel. You converted that into the energy of the car moving down the road. But now you want to slow down, and you got to take that energy. You can't destroy it. It has to go somewhere. And so what you do is you use friction to take that energy of the car and turn it into heat. So we've got both a diagram over here showing what's happening and also a picture of a car. It's a rotor, which is this big thing. It's pretty heavy. It's a big hunk of metal. And as you're driving along, you decide to stop. You press your foot on the brake pedal, and that motion is transmitted through brake fluid to the wheel, to this rotor that is bolted to the wheel. So rotor rotation, it's spinning. And then you have 2 brake pads on each side, and they're going to clamp down on that, and it's going to stop the motion. You're going to use friction. This thing is going to get pretty hot, and you're going to slow down. So because the brake pads are using friction, they are wearing away. And that is one of the maintenance things you're going to do. After a number of miles, you'll need to replace those brake pads. Brakes get hot, car slows down, and then wearing away. And so the purpose of the brakes, this is a very common form of brakes, these rotor brakes. Most cars will have them on at least one axle, but there's other ways that you can slow down a car. The whole point is just getting rid of the energy. So hybrid cars are really interesting because not only do they use this brake right here, but they also have a second braking system to use up some of the energy where that electric motor that the hybrid car is using to power you down the road will actually work backwards and harvest some of that energy back. So I think that's really great. And you go and you take that energy, you put it back in the battery, and then next time you want to speed up again, you're taking it back and using it to accelerate. So that's a way to rescue some of that energy and not just turn it into heat, but to use it again in a hybrid system. And so if any of you decide to become engineers and decide to design cars someday, It's a great thing to think about, not just how do I replicate a system, but how do I solve the problem of I need to slow down? How do I solve the problem of I need to get rid of this energy, put it somewhere else? And what different ideas can I come up with for how to do that? That might be maybe a little bit more environmentally friendly, maybe a little bit more cost effective, but what can you do? So I'm going to talk about my favorite part of being a technician, which is diagnosing problems. So we get cars in all the time where something has gone wrong. What I like about this job is that it's not just about how strong am I, it's about how can I figure it out? How can I be a detective? So my process when I have a problem like that is that I'll interview the driver. What's going on? What are you experiencing? I'll hunt for clues. I'll go into the car's computer and see what is that telling me. I'll take a look around the car. I'll see, does anything look wrong? Are all the fluids and other things how they should be? And then I'll do some research. There's a lot of online resources we use. For example, if we have what's called an error code, a trouble code, I might go and look that code up and see what does it mean. And I'll form a hypothesis about what could be wrong. Then I'll test that hypothesis to see if I'm right. If I'm not, obviously, I'm going to go and try something new again, form another hypothesis. And if I am right, I get to fix the car and send it out. And that's great. So over here on the right, I have a car that I had last week, and I'm just going to walk you through that same process. The car came in, it had a lot of warning lights, and it had disabled braking features and traction safety features. So the ABS is something you might hear about. That was off. There was a lot of lights. So I went into the computer, and I found that there was a warning about one of those wheel speed sensors I mentioned, the one that is counting how many times is that wheel going around. And then it wasn't reporting. So that the car was saying 3 wheels are turning, and then 1 wheel is just stationary. But I knew that wheel was still actually turning because I could see it turning as I moved the car into the shop. So since I knew which sensor had the problem, I assumed that it wasn't reporting data. Maybe there's a problem with the connection. So I went, started taking things apart, and I found right here, you can see these wires are disconnected. And actually a rat had gone and chewed through those wires, and so it couldn't report because it wasn't connected anymore. So that was great. I had found the problem, and I could replace that part, drive it again, graph all the speeds, make sure that they were all still reporting now that I'd gotten it reconnected, and the car was on its way. So some problems are pretty easy. You can figure them out really fast. Some are really challenging. Things like if you have an animal going through and like chewing things up, if you have a car that's gotten flooded, if you have a car that maybe has just a strange problem, those can be really challenging and take a lot of time. And so that's why becoming very good at diagnosing cars can make you a really valuable part of a shop. And that's my personal goal, is that I want to learn how to diagnose more and get to do it more because I love solving puzzles like this. So this one, I'm going to have you help me figure it out. I'm going to give you some information. It's a car we had just last week. And then we're going to have a chat waterfall for a minute where you can take a look and let us know what you see. So it was a Toyota Camry hybrid. So that's a car that has a really big battery, and it wasn't starting. There were lots of warning lights. It got towed in. And so I scanned the computer, and this is the information I got about that battery pack. So the battery pack, take a look, see what you see. But a battery pack is made up of a bunch of different blocks, and you need it to power the car. So take a look and see if anything here looks weird or odd.
All right. So we've got another chart with data in it, you guys. Okay. How important is data? This looks a lot like some of the charts we've been looking at before, right? Good. So Brian's observing the charge, the battery state of charge is at 0%. Good reading of the chart. What else do you guys see on this chart that looks a little weird or unusual, or we should try to figure out what's going on? Kind of take a look. On the left side, we've got some labels, and on the right side, we've got some numbers.
Yep,
the
and the
V
numbers are
at
talking
the
about
end stands
voltages.
for volts. So you might have heard that before in electricity. We're going to be doing more electricity and batteries and stuff. Like Brian had a great question in the chat. That's all like second semester when we do electricity. But V stands for volts. Mm-hmm. Okay? Ooh, Tyler says the seventh block is lower than all the others. It is half of what it's supposed to be. Yeah,
Yeah, the 7-volt block.
right?
Yep.
Battery block 8 has a dive. Okay, good. So you guys are kind of seeing, right? So data can tell us things. We're like, wait a minute, what's going on? The pattern is broken,
Mm-hmm.
right? We've been looking a lot at data and patterns, right? The 8th block. Yes, the battery block V8.
And that's the one
Okay.
with the 7 volts.
Yeah.
And there are 3 different things that I see here. The first one is you got called about 0% charge. Just like your phone, you do not want to try to charge something and have it come up 0% charge. That's really bad. At the top, put P3000. That's an example of an error code, and it's saying battery control system. So the computer's already saying something in the battery is going on. So I've got that error, I've got the 0%, and then I've got that block that is half the voltage of all the others. And so this is a picture of our master technician, Doug. After we looked at this, we saw there's definitely something going on in the battery. We went and pulled that battery out. It's that battery stack right there. It's like a 3-foot tall battery stack. And you see right in the middle, there's one that's black. That one had actually, some of the cells in the battery had blown up. So battery was not working anymore. And when we got that out of there, we replaced that, and then the car was able to operate. I really like this example, and it was fun to physically see, because sometimes you know something is wrong, but you can't actually see it. And in this case, you're actually able to visually see this battery was slightly on fire. So I've got, we did record some videos of some of my coworkers recording answers to some other questions that you had. Over here on the left, you have Pepper, who's our shop dog, who I just wanted to share a photo of. But really quick, before that, I wanted to let you know there's a lot of different kinds of automotive work you can do. So I'm going to run through a couple of them, but you can work on all kinds of vehicles. You can work at a dealership where you're working on just one kind of car, or at a big chain. You can work in a fleet and fix buses. And then there's really fun jobs like customization and restoration, where you're like taking an old car like the one that I took a picture of here and restoring that, or where you're going and making a car maybe go faster, maybe look cooler. You can do smog inspections where you get polluting cars off the road, or you can do body work where a car's been in a collision and you can fix it. And then finally, designing vehicles. All kinds of manufacturers do things in slightly different ways. There's the same principles. You need to move a car. You need to keep it cool. You need to be able to steer and stop and all those things. But different manufacturers might do that in a different way. And so if you decide to become an engineer, you would also want to think about those puzzles about what is the best way to do it. But that's one of the things I really love about working on cars, is seeing how different manufacturers do things.
Any questions about braking, about friction, about tires, about crazy cars that came in? I have a question for you, Shelbert.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried to what's the most unusual hybrid that you ever had to work on? Because most of the time it's Priuses, but are there any like really cool hybrids that you've worked on?
Let's see, some of the Ford hybrids, they design things in strange ways, and so something that you want to be able to fix really easily, you got to really dig, and so you find yourself sort of with your head underneath the dash and your feet like halfway up the driver's seat, and that's sort of a crazy thing to be doing. Like, why did they hide this filter like somewhere it's so hard to find? I also enjoy some of the newer Subarus that are hybrids. It's been fun to see those because those have a different style of engine. But I'm just excited that more and more cars are coming in. We started to get some Kias and other things like that.
Let's see. Juan asks, has anyone come in with a really weird car mod? What's a car mod? You're talking language I don't even know. What do you mean?
Car modification, yeah.
Oh, a car modification. Mm-hmm.
What people will do with their cars that I think is interesting is that if you have a car and you want to use it for like a job, people will go and rip all of the seats out in the back and build shelving in the back and things like that, which is really fun, but also can be difficult because when you sit in a car, you're just sort of sitting on the seat, but you don't know that underneath that seat, there's actually things we need to access. Like if you want to access the gas tank, you take out the back seat and you get to it from the top. So sometimes you've got somebody's entire shelving unit and you got to, get that out of the car so you can get to what you need to access. I see there's a question about body work. One fun thing that I learned is that if you get a dent in a car, a lot of cars, you can actually get that dent out by heating it up and popping it out, usually with a bumper. It depends on the material. So I actually am over here a lot with like a heat gun, kind of like a hair dryer, and popping dents out of cars. So you got to be careful not to burn yourself. That's my only tip. There's videos on YouTube. You can see how to do it.
It's a lot hotter than a hair dryer.
Yeah, a lot.
Try that at home, right?
And you got to be careful not to boil the paint, because if you get too enthusiastic and you get too close, then the paint will start to bubble, and you're like, oh no. But I think a big part of the job is problem solving, is learning how to do something, and once you've done it 10 times, it's easy, but the first time it can be pretty difficult to figure out. That's both difficult, and I really, really like it because you can see that you're getting better over time.
Did you ever, like, how bad, like, one of the things they talk about is when a car is totaled. This is kind of going back to Tyler's question.
Sure.
Like, when is it not worth it to fix a car? You know, like when was it bad but still fixable versus not? Like, how can you even tell?
That is, for a lot of the times for insurance companies, if your car is has like comprehensive insurance, it's about money. So the company, one thing that we see a lot with Priuses, unfortunately, is that people are stealing catalytic converters. And that's a lot of modifications we see because people are trying to stop that from happening. So you get under these cars and people have welded rebar all over the place, you know, or big plates or other things like that. You'll see one of those in one of my videos that my coworker Marlon did.
Marlon's video.
But a catalytic converter in California can cost $3,000. So an insurance company might take a car that just has one thing wrong with it, but it isn't worth it for them to repair it. And that can be really hard because you know that the car works perfectly fine. So it can be about money. It can also be about cumulative problems. So if you have a car that you have one thing wrong with it today, but you also know that it's burning oil up, and so the engine is getting worse and worse, and you know that the tires are going to need to be replaced in like a week and a half, you might decide financially. But some people just really love their cars, and they will just keep them going. They will just say, I'm gonna make this car last forever. And so it's kind of personal.